Hey everybody, here we are. It's another time for the Baseline Show here at in the sunny internet. It's nice to see everybody. We're here for. Hang on, I've got feedback as always. We have a very special guest today, and a very good friend of mine, Richard Gendel Brown. Who is one of the founders of R3 and Corda, and has a new project that I want to hear all about today that is, I think, is really making a lot of waves. It's all the reason Richard is here in particular is that we all have the same goal, different ways of approaching it, but the same goal, which is to really improve and expand high security multi-party business activities, right? Workflows, coordination, multi-party compute. How's it going, Richard?
Good, thanks, John. It's great to be interviewed by you. We normally get dragged in whenever anybody wants to fight. They always used to get us on a podcast together and just set us against each other. So it's nice to have a proper conversation where we agree.
I know, and we don't really fight, right? We just kind of like say nice things to each other.
No, your passive aggressive Twitter feuds are really entertaining.
Oh, I do agree with that. It's great to have you here. What's the so tell us about the project you're working on, and where people can find it and learn about it.
Sure. So like you said, most people, to the extent they know me probably from Corda, the permissions blockchain that we built at R3. So I'm the CTO at R3, so I still have oversight of that. But as you say, John, for the last year or so, maybe a bit longer now, I've been overseeing the development of something called Conclave, which is it's a confidential computing platform. So in some ways, I think some people might see it as a competitive approach or an alternate approach to zero knowledge proofs, but I'm not sure that's quite right. But it's a platform, and we can get into it in more detail, that allows you at essence to write some code and then prove to the people who are using that code, so the clients, prove to them that that's the code that's running. So you can imagine yourself now from the perspective of the user. I'm going to send some data somewhere, maybe because I want it to be processed, or I want it to be matched, which gets us into the multi-party conversation in a sec. I want it to be matched with other people's data, but ultimately I've got some data. I'm going to send it somewhere else. How can I know what's going to happen to it? Once it's in somebody else's hands, normally they can do whatever the hell they like. They could do what they say they will. They could be honest, but they could publish it on the front page of the New York Times, or they could use it for various activities. So what if you could know in advance what would happen to it before you sent it? Now, there's no magic in what we do. We're relying on underlying hardware technology, in our case, SGX from Intel, but making it accessible and usable is where we really focused. So net, imagine you could write programs that could prove to their users that they are indeed running, and they're running as described. That's the idea.
Very cool. So Richard, tell me, I mean, it's called Conclave, right? And I think it's conclave.net, right? So that's the place people should go.
Oh yeah, thank you. Yeah, I should have answered that question. Yeah, Conclave, CONCLAVE.net. And to give a bit of, I guess, intuition there, and hopefully this doesn't offend, hopefully it doesn't offend people, because if it does, there's a billion people who'd be offended. But it was more, when we're thinking of, what name could we use for it? We were thinking of, I think I probably just read, I'm not sure if it's a Robert Harris or a Dan Brown novel, hopefully the former, because I wouldn't admit to the latter. But think about a papal conclave. The cardinals go into that room, no one can see what's happening, they're cardinals, so you assume they're trustworthy. Something happens, and then the black or white smoke goes up, and the new pope may or may not be elected. So this idea of something's happening behind closed doors, they're going to do what they're supposed to do. They're going to follow the rules completely religiously, literally religiously in their case, but you can't see inside. All you know is they're going to do what they said they would. That's kind of the idea. So akin to a papal conclave, conclave.net.
I used to live.
That is Dan Brown, by the way.
Yeah.
I read the book.
I used to live in Constance, Germany, and they're famous for having done in 13. I want to say 1348, but I could have the last two digits wrong. A major they were the site of, I think, the only site outside of Italy that did a conclave / what do they call it, a concile.
Wow.
So it was a big deal. Andreas, you probably know about that.
Yeah, it was like that's why they still have that
A beautiful building.
have that seat in the Vatican with a hole in it on top and below, and then the all the cardinals have to go in, grab in, and say Papa hab is over.
Wow, there's the expertise. Yeah.
It's you could actually see it in the Vatican if you go take a Vatican tour. It's like sitting a little bit in the corner, but it's sort of like one of the dirty little secrets because they elected a woman as Pope.
Woman Pope.
Oh, of course. Yeah. It's coming back to me now.
So
And then
I
ever
think
since
that,
then, it's
I
like,
think that
how do you check that
smoke
you're
under zero
sure
knowledge
that
is-
you're electing a man, right?
Smoke under zero knowledge is clearly an opportunity for multi-party smoke is what we're really talking about today. Actually, oddly enough, kind of apropos, we're talking about signaling. So Richard, I mean, one of the things we talk about a lot with Baseline is, this notion of being able to say, hey, I can prove that Nick and I have some information in common on regular old databases, and that there's something about that information that is important in order for you to be sure of, in order for you to do some step in a workflow between the three of us, right? And we don't really want to give you the actual information. We just need you to know, A, that something has occurred that was done correctly. There's some attributes of that you needed to be sure of that are correct, like, X is over Y, or this, happened before this, or here is, that there are appropriate signatures from, entities that are in a list, right? So you got identity proofs, you have range proofs, et cetera. And then we're gonna drop that on a public bulletin board, maybe a blockchain. Maybe it doesn't have a CCSM. I think Corda actually complies with the specification for a CCSM, a consensus controlled state machine. And in fact, you got in my head about this whole idea about private or permissioned public networks, right? And
Yeah.
remember, I hated that idea. I don't mind that idea in this particular use, because all I'm doing is dropping proofs on the thing. And then I'm in the case of things like Base Ledger is a state machine that does this. It's permissioned, but they anchor all of their Merkle trees to a public blockchain like Ethereum. So you have really good tamper resistance, but you're not telling the blockchain anything interesting, right? There's nothing really to see there. So that's kind of how we approach it. You're going much deeper into multi-party compute, and so say more about that. I mean, you've got
So maybe start with blockchain then. So I'm gonna garble together two different scenarios, but hopefully they mesh. So we think about, so there's a high profile, I won't name them, but there's a high profile project on Corda doing reinsurance. So this is a typical blockchain situation where an insurer's written a policy. The policy is too big for them to underwrite all by themselves. So then they sort of like they lay off some of that risk with various reinsurers. And that's a situation where you actually want all those participants to see everything. The reinsurers want to know what risk they've written. And so you could use a fabric channels thing. You could use something equivalent in Quorum, or in Corda, you just make sure the data goes to the right people. So it's kind of like it's a semi-private bulletin board. You want the people who are in that deal to see it. Happy days, everything's fine. But as we work through those kinds of problems,
you just use Kafka.
Yeah. Well, yeah, but no, okay, sure, you probably could, but even if you did that, you think, okay, fine, but there are certain problems you can't solve. So if I now switch to a different insurance problem, and now this is going to be car insurance fraud, here's a problem that I can't solve with the blockchain, or I certainly couldn't solve with Corda. So I'm just a regular insurer in like the UK or in in Germany. In fact, it has to be Germany or continental Europe, somewhere where GDPR has been taken and then made ever more, it has been gold plated. You're an insurer, somebody comes along to you and says, right, I want insurance for this car. Great, that's fine. But if they're a bad guy or a bad woman, there's a really easy way they can rip you off, which is to take that car and insure it with 10 insurers. So they get one car, they've got one car, they take out 10 policies, 500 euros, whatever it is. Because of course, what they're then going to do is completely trash that car and then take 10 payments, one from each of the insurers. They've just made effectively a 10x profit minus their costs. The only way those insurers could detect that in advance is if they were to share with each other the list of cars they're insuring. The cars are uniquely identifiable. They've got a VIN, a vehicle identification number. So technically, it's trivial to solve. They could just publish to each other, send an email to each other, say, hey, we have written policies against these VINs, and then they could just do a set intersection in effect to say which of us are underwriting the same car. The problem is that would just violate everybody's privacy, because every insurer would know everybody else's what they're insuring. It would give away their business models, the kind of risk appetite. It doesn't work because you can't bring that data together safely in a compliant way. However, if you could somehow imagine, so this is back now to sort of like, imagine you had a completely infallible and sort of trustworthy person. Imagine if those insurers could give those lists of VINs to somebody they could trust, whose job is simply to look for overlaps. They cannot do anything else. They will not do anything else. They just look for the overlaps, and then go back to the insurers and say, hey guys, you are insuring these specific cars in common. That is a prima facie example. The only reason that could possibly be true is because of fraud. GDPR doesn't apply. These guys are defrauding you. Go sort it out. So if you could do that, you could just eliminate that class of fraud. So that's a multi-party compute problem, literally a private set intersection that you can't do with without advanced cryptography or without hardware support. You can't do it on a blockchain. And we kept coming across those kinds of problems, and realized, actually, you know what? There's an adjacency to the blockchain space, which is, if you like, the multi-party compute space, of which that's just an example. And we were already working with, in our case, that hardware technology, because we needed it for a separate privacy issue in Corda. So we thought, hang on, this is independently useful. We should probably productize it rather than just keeping it for ourselves. But it's just any way you want to bring data together, but you don't want anybody, including the operator of the machine that's processing it, you don't want anybody to be able to see the raw data. That's just a common problem we keep seeing everywhere.
Right on. So, I mean, there's a lot to that. So you're sending compute over to a counterparty. You're sending instructions, right, over, and then putting that into the trusted compute environment. So you're sending me the data rather than me sending you sending me the compute rather than me sending you the data.
That's a good point. So somebody has written the algorithm. So you still need a computer programmer somewhere. Somebody's written the algorithm.
Right.
Typically, the way it happens is, somebody who perhaps wants to get a fee for hosting it or whatever, and someone's written it, and then there's no magic to this. They then show it to the firms who are thinking of using it, or the people who are thinking of using it, because the question they've got to ask themselves, so the question those insurers in that case have to ask themselves is, okay, if this algorithm were to operate on my data, would I be okay? So you look at it and say, is it literally just performing a set intersection? Is there a backdoor? Is it publishing it to a third party? No, it's simply taking these 10 sets, doing the intersections, and then sending back messages to those who have overlaps. Does that code do what I expect? Question number one. So would I, in principle, be happy for that code to operate on my data? And if the answer is yes, happy days. Question two, how on earth do I know that's the code that actually will operate on my data? So that's where the hardware piece comes in. You have to trust, and there's been high profile breaches, but you have to trust the hardware when it sends you this thing called an attestation. It sends you effectively a signature from the hardware that says, I promise the code with that hash. So I promise that this code is the code that's running. And this is the only thing in the world that knows the private key associated with this public key. So if you encrypt your data under this public key and send it to this computer, the only thing in the entire world that can decrypt your data and process it is that specific algorithm. So it's in effect that you're encrypting data, but when you send it somewhere, you're not sending it to an individual or a company, you're sending it to a specific algorithm that you could in principle have audited in advance. And therefore
a fancy Lambda function.
Yeah, exactly.
Secure fancy Lambda function.
Oh, well, keep your eye on conclave.net. Conclave Cloud goes live in a few weeks, and a tested Lambda is exactly what you're going to see. So.
Interesting. So I think we're all, I mean, that's a pretty interesting approach. And frankly, I don't see any reason why that approach isn't kind of a part of the baseline. If what we're really doing here, is getting a word up, a kind of a namespace up in front of a emerging problem to solve. We've always had the problem of multi-party coordination and integration, right? We've always had it, but now it's becoming the thing to worry about, right? The thing to do. For years, I mean, Richard, I think you and I have, and a lot of people on this call have spent our careers on the previous problem, which was getting our houses in order internally. Right. And doing that, we all, sent, we all made some money on that at places like IBM and elsewhere. Middleware and stuff.
Yeah. Application servers, EI, ESBs, SOA, all that stuff.
Yeah. Right. And so, Rachel Reinitz, I remember. Yeah. So
many club trips have been paid for on the back of middleware.
Many Vegas events, as I recall, as well.
Yeah, actually, many yachts, especially racing catamarans.
That's Oracle.
Yeah, Redwood Shores. Yeah.
I didn't want to be that me. I just gave the subtle hint.
But I agree with you, John. I mean, this idea that I sometimes think, although I've talked about blockchain a lot, I think I'm completely with you, which is what I think I don't want to speak for anybody else, but I think what we're talking about is the first 30, 40, 50 years of IT were all about optimizing individual firms. It's now about optimizing the markets that they operate in and the interactions between them. So it's, as you say, so if it's, I know that what I see is what you see, which is sort of like, the blockchain promise. Can I automate business processes between these firms? Can I pre-agree what there's a whole bunch of it. Can I pre-agree which transitions or which updates to my database are permissible without me signing off on them? And then how can we share data in a way where we know for sure how it's going to be processed? So I think it incorporates trusted execution environment. I think it aspects of ZKP, SMPC. I'm less sure about fully homomorphic encryption. I kind of don't get that. And it certainly includes.
I think homomorphic encryption, I'm sure that Craig Gentry would still say is pretty rough stuff, even for traditional computing systems.
Well, just as an aside, and because I suspect Andreas might know the answer to this, I would love somebody who can explain to me how I know that the operator of an FHE system has done what I asked them to. I know they can't see the data, but how do I know they did what I asked them without me rerunning the algorithm myself? At which point, what was the point? So that's the bit I've never understood about FHE.
And we will spend the next hour on that topic. Andreas, please go for it.
That's why creating a verifiable delay function is really hard.
Yeah.
But it's true. It's just like because it only works if it's a multi-party compute problem, and you can make sure that you're getting the right answer if at least one of the participants is honest, right? That's the one, in which case if a lot of money is riding on it, you need to come up with an economic security guarantee system to disincentivize dishonesty, right? So you're basically back to a public blockchain system, right?
And then you've got those trade-offs to deal with, right? That's the problem.
Yeah, it's always about trade-offs, right? It's like what's your there's no right or wrong answer, right?
Computer science is only what trade-offs are you willing to. You get this, you have to give up that. In fact, if you can be fully transparent and you can go to a digital news colony, then you can. And you can send your data to Burning Man, then you don't have to do all this fancy stuff, right? Or if you can have a big shared database. You can know where all the bad radishes are because you can do a graft reversal and find out where all that, where every radish that touched another radish that was contaminated, and you can do an epidemiological study on that, right? It's great. The problem is, last I checked, companies don't want to give that much data away, right? So Richard, going back to that, I think that's pretty interesting. In fact, I wonder if one of the stories that we've been telling about baselining has been about that, right? You say, well, we can't, if you can't, like with like Food Trust, right? Or like the Walmart thing. I don't know how much longer, everybody's going to feel good about putting, even with a powerful company like Walmart there. And of course that means that they don't have this for other parties other than Walmart, that I know of at least. It's hard to get. I mean, Ariba tried to do this in the 90s, right? And said, hey, you can all do your own thing as long as you run through us, right? And that would have been a nice world because we could have done a lot of coordination. But as they started making money, alternatives started going, hey, maybe we should have compete with them, and you wound up with balkanization again.
Yeah.
Right. So how do we? So our approach was, well, we can't tell you where all the bad radishes are, but under zero knowledge, I can give you can scan this palette of radishes, and I can prove that it hasn't. If I'm clever about how I do the serialization of the lots, I can prove that this lot of radishes has never touched a known contaminated radish, right? But that's an upside down approach to the problem. Do you guys have an approach where one could do that and kind of have their cake and eat it too? I want to do it. I want to be able to find all the bad radishes in one click.
Okay, so I don't know about that, but you just made me think about my team persuaded me to tone it down, but I put a blog post out. Maybe I should have done that for some of our previous blog posts, but I put one out a week or two ago, basically trying to say anything. It was deliberately trying to provoke a response, but it was basically saying anything you can do in a zero knowledge proof, you can do in a trusted execution environment, albeit with very different sort of threat model and trade-offs. And the example I gave was proving your age. So you sort of take a digital passport, you send it in, and you get a signature out. But going back to your radishes example, I'm going to change the scenario slightly, but let's imagine what I have is just like I've just got a photograph of just like all the radishes I'm going to sell next week, and you could imagine we've pre-agreed what algorithms are some sort of trained model, what algorithm could you use that is guaranteed to tell you if any of them look bad, to basically just something that can just analyze the photo. Maybe it's really trivial, it just actually just looks for the color or whatever it is. You could imagine writing a zero knowledge proof that coming out of the back of that is I forget the exact way you describe it, but this proof tests that the input, which I'm not going to show to you, was a photo of all my radishes, maybe with a newspaper next to it to prove the date, and they were all good. You could imagine doing a zero knowledge proof that looks a bit like that. And the point
this would be different. Let me just correct a little bit. This would be I need to be say a salmonella outbreak occurs or some other kind of contamination occurs in warehouse X, right? And now the produce in that warehouse is suspect. And then the produce went out and it touched other produce, which touched other produce. And you have this cascading problem, right? One of the things that was really powerful about Food Trust, and I've spoken to the leaders of this, and they do love this. They love the idea of, I think the leader of it a couple of years ago said, in 2 minutes I can find, or 2 seconds or something, I can find out, where the which produce I need to take off the shelves. And I said, my cheeky response to that was, you may be the nicest intellectual bully, but I'm the funniest intellectual bully.
Very, very true.
I think that's actually apt. But so I
looks aren't everything, John.
You could have taken 2 milliseconds if you'd written it in Mongo, is what my point was. Or Neo4j, right? It'd probably be even faster.
Now the really interesting question here is can you prove this without knowing anything about where it was, who it touched, who attested to it,
right?
Right.
because the
in
counterparties
one proof that
yeah,
I
that-
can
yeah.
that I can verify in a few milliseconds.
So, okay, let me see if I can frame the question, because I'm coming at this cold. So let's imagine let's imagine there's a shipment, there's a container, whatever it is, full of radishes, and that shipment, there's some way of identifying that shipment. What is it? I need to be able to prove that I possess documents that meet some test of being sort of provenance documents. So I've got documents that do two things. One, they prove where it came from, and I can prove that all the radishes, I need a completeness proof, something that says all the radishes for each of them, there is at least one, there is precisely one document saying where it came from. So I can prove to you that I have those documents, and then I can prove to you that those documents, or something about where they went to, none of them were ever in location X at any given time. So it's
right, or touched anything that touched anything that touched anything that was in location X.
Yeah.
It would be a pretty, by the way, Andrew, that would be a pretty gnarly zero knowledge circuit to write. I'm wondering, Richard, if there's another way approach to this, more down your angle. And I'm going to call all of this baselining, by the way, because I mean, it's baselining is an approach to the problem of multi-party. It doesn't. I don't think it even needs to, in the long run, be about any particular technique, even zero knowledge. I don't know why what you're doing. I don't personally know why. I don't speak for the TSC, but I don't personally know why what you're doing couldn't be qualified as a particular type of baselining. So what if we said, okay, nobody no counterparty wants to buy or wants to put their data into a big honeypot, right? But we can run sort of an ML sparse data analytics algorithm where I'm going to send logic to the 50 counterparties that are in that supply chain, right? And have them, we all agree, when you get this, you will run it. We have, so instead of having a big infrastructure run by an IBM or an Oracle, where we have, issues, we say, we're all running wherever we're running, in our own clouds, in on-prem, wherever it is. We are set up all in the same way. And when the head of Walmart says, red alert, we've got bad radishes, it pushes out the analytics package under your technique, right, into TEEs, and does its work, and then comes back with here are all the places where all the bad protus is.
That's interesting. So I think
without revealing the actual data to each other.
So I think you could. So I guess if I'm understanding that, the assumption would be. So so you narrow it down. So for any one of these participants, at its absolute essence, you're essentially making an API call that says, the radish shipments with these IDs, I want you to, on the assumption your database hasn't been tampered with, I want you to confirm that you've genuinely run them against that to make sure they were never in the wrong location. You're going to run them against your ERP system, whatever it is, whatever logic you have to run to convince yourself that those shipments were never in a certain place. I want you to go do it, and I want to know that you've genuinely run that algorithm. Then
right.
if you
or I'm gonna run this algorithm on your stuff, and you're going to tell me whether or not any of the stuff within your purview, say you're a 3PL or something, right, your shipper, and I construct the setup such that, and we could use baselining or ZK and the signaling. By the way, we could put a proof on a public network that triggers everybody doing this. By the way, which is what would be a great join between what we've been working on, what you've been working on, right? So again, that magic bus approach, right? To say, hey, we're all looking at this sort of fancy only keys Kafka, right? Which is kind of how I think of the blockchain part of this. Right. So that's the signaler. That's the event trigger, right? We're all watching for this location. When that link location hits and there's something there, we're going to run a verifier, and then that could trigger a bunch of stuff. And one of the things it could trigger is, hey, let's all check our own inventory data and see if, and then have a machine learning algorithm run in each of our TEEs that collectively compiles here are the actual locations of all the bad stuff.
So I think you could. There's one twist to this, which I guess is about, maybe this is just a deployment point, which is, if, as you say, this trusted execution environment. It's just I guess just to restate what you just said. This is something that, if you, when it runs on some data, it is guaranteed, within the security model, is guaranteed to process that data in a way that it has committed to up front, and then at the end, this is the important thing. It will prove to you, or it will provide a certificate that says this output genuinely was the result of running this computation on some data, and it doesn't reveal the data unless it's coded to, so you get something akin to zero knowledge. The question then is, where does that run? Because you could run it, you could send the code to each of those shippers, but if this whole thing works as designed, the only thing that code can do is what it's programmed to. So you could also do the opposite, which is, if this technology works, the shippers should be happy to send their data to the central processor. So rather than them all having to install this specialized hardware and all having to manage this system, they should be perfectly happy just to upload their data to that single processor in the cloud, because the cloud operator is entirely unprivileged. They don't get any, there's no power differential or sort of advantage they get from running it, because they cannot see inside, they cannot influence it. All they can do is faithfully run the code. So
it's going to be a long while of convincing people that technology they don't understand is truly unavailable to the people, to the organization that runs it. I get your point, right? Which is, hey, look at this black box. Even I don't have access to it.
Promise.
Trust me.
Yeah, I agree. So there's a journey of maturation and acceptance. But yeah, that's the essence of it. Actually, someone who's trying to get in.
I actually had a question on there. Is what happens in the step before the actual?
By the way, but before you get going, Richard, Mark Haddle, very experienced in insurance and reinsurance.
You probably hated my example.
Oh no!
Really, like he's a subject matter expert on a lot of stuff.
And just seeing the antediluvian process environments that insurers really operate under, yes, trying to bring it, even to the 21st century is a tall order. So, but my question actually, before it comes to the population, my question is generally on the data capture and population. Say I have a flat of strawberries that I picked at 10:30 this morning, and that flat has 20 small containers in it. Do I give each one of those a barcode or an RFID or whatever? And then how is that populated to the, it's the capture and population, to the platform? Because that's where I see a lot of the stuff falling apart, because you've got these farmers that are saying, I grow strawberries or I grow foodstuffs. I'm not really interested in trying to put all this together. And who absorbs the cost of setting that up? Is it me?
I'd love to know. I'd love to know how Food Trust did that, because there's always that thing about the bridge from the analog world to the digital world. You've got to trust the organization that says there are 20. There's each of these pallets has got real strawberries in it. It's why maybe I was a bit tricksy, but I used the insurance example in the way I did deliberately, because VINs are well understood and people do trust the car manufacturers not to duplicate them and not to lie about them. So VINs are probably one of the few sort of analog things that truly are you can trust. There aren't two cars out there with the same VIN. That bridge from the digital to the analog world is really hard to get right. The car manufacturers have nailed it, but most people haven't.
Well, and so many algorithms are very optimized for that 18-character alphanumeric VIN. Yeah. So there's a lot right off the shelf that you can actually use, using VINs as your primary data focus and stuff.
So, I think Mark brings up a really interesting point. I mean, identity is critical.
Introduce yourself so that Richard knows you are. Sorry about that.
Oh, hey, Richard. I think we've met a couple times before. Charles Todd. Been working with John and the team over here for quite some time, and love what we're up to, and love what you're up to with Conclave and even Obscuro, if we talk about that. But Mark is touching on an interesting subject that I'd love to get your feedback on: identity. The verification of the identity in that asset, whether it's an asset, an individual, an organization, a moment in time, the verification and the assurance of that identity is really what is predicating all of this computation and knowledge base to be facilitated. How are you looking at this over at R3 with Conclave?
That's a good question. So So I guess I should say possibly because it's so hard, we don't have a comparable project, Food Trust. That problem of trying to. I've always struggled with, exactly John's example. Provenance of radishes or provenance of strawberries. That you can. It's only good if you can trust the entity that attested that radish really did get loaded where you said it would. So when we work on those kinds of projects, and I haven't got a sort of like a perfect answer. But the question I always ask myself is, there is no independent fact that there are 50 radishes, in that pallet in that location. There is somebody I need to trust. So who is it who is signed to say it? So it all comes back to maybe this is where you're going with identity. There is some entity that is signed to say, I assert that this thing is true, signed X, and the correctness of the overall solution depends on you deciding who are the X's you're going to trust. So for the insurance example, I trust the car manufacturers. For the radishes, presumably certain growers are, they are audited, inspected, and if they lie, they get kicked off the Walmart network. But you've got to figure out, who is it I trust to say which things under which circumstances, and then they have to be enrolled.
We always used to say, right, you can put a box of guns in a box or a bunch of guns in a box and call it bananas and put it on a blockchain just fine. The question is, is there value in that being a permanent lie? And I think there is, right? There's some value in making it very hard to change the lie later on. I heard through somebody who's very familiar, I won't say who, but a very knowledgeable person in the space told me that the amount of fraud, losses in fraud due to bank employees that are corrupted, changing the general ledger after the fact, after an entry has been made, not doing a balancing entry, changing the GL, is in the billions a month.
Yep.
Right, according to estimated by FBI. So
And
that's
those
crazy.
are only the ones that get caught, John. Those are the only ones that are known.
Right, but but often it's important to cover your tracks by changing the lie later.
There's the opposite, which maybe this is a diversion, but I guess it's a salutary lesson for any of us building computer systems. I don't know how many Brits are on this call, but some of you may be aware of this. There's a scandal currently playing out in the UK system, in the UK sort of judicial system. Potentially, they're describing it as the worst miscarriage of justice in British history. It went on for 20 years. And it was the opposite of what we just described. It was the rollout in the early 2000s of a new IT system for the British Post Office. So all these little small stores all over the country, where it was like little small business owners owned the franchise. They were selling stamps, processing people's money and all the rest of it. New computer system, full of bugs. The computer system said that these franchisees were stealing money. The presumption in law was the computer is correct unless you can prove that it's not. So it completely turned the burden of proof on its head under UK law as it was at the time. Thousands of people lost their livelihoods, hundreds were prosecuted, several committed suicide. And it was the opposite of what we just said, which was the system was faulty and it couldn't be proven it was faulty because it didn't have proper audit logs. It was possible to tamper and you couldn't evidence it. So back to your point, John, the fact that it was not robust destroyed people's lives. So it kind of cuts both ways. And I think the stuff we're talking about here, is the right approach to preventing that kind of stuff as well. Yeah.
Oh,
well,
that's crazy.
And I commonly would tell people, you can lie to the blockchain. You just can't lie that you lied to the blockchain.
Hey, Andreas, you got something to say there? Sorry, I saw your hand up there. Unless it was a mistake.
No. So first of all, if you need temper evidence, right, the easiest way is a verifiable credential. I mean, most of the use cases, like I would say 98%, you can handle with verifiable credentials, right? It's temper evidence, clear, it's done, right? As long as someone
State
attests
hash your
that.
database. Yeah.
Huh?
State hash your database and put it on the New York Times classified session once a day. That'll be
Well,
fine.
yeah, but it's more like that. You signed it, which means you claim it, which means not only do you put the hash on, but you put your digital signature. That contains the hash on there. That's the thing.
Yeah,
right?
the information may not be true, but it's authenticated. You know who made the assertion.
Right.
Yeah, right.
So it's basically the key thing is always the root of trust problem. So you need a root of trust. You need to at one point. So again, I would claim, and I would be able to, I can prove that most use cases are you can handle with DITs and VCs and be done with it. What is really interesting is the question of comes back to trade-offs and where you use TEs versus more advanced cryptography where you do multi-party compute and things like that, and it comes back down to the what's the value at stake.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
It's like, do you need more compute in terms of if I have simple statements? So for example, Richard, your example with the VIN numbers is actually, I would say, is a poor use of a TE, right?
Because there's a perfectly acceptable SMPC solution to that same problem.
Well, there's a it's like you can do a membership proof and you have updatable proofs. Everybody can run it. It's independent. You just need to write it to a place that everybody can access. Wait a second, John. What's a place that everybody can access? No one
your favorite digital nudist
censor
colony?
you.
Yeah.
Huh?
Everyone's favorite digital nudist colony?
Yeah, something like that. But it's like that's easy. You don't know who updated it, right? And and the proof's there, and you can check whether a VIN is a member of that set or not, right? And it is actually perfectly perfect. That I would claim is the better ways to do it. However, something like a fair follow delay function, that's a great use case.
That'd be pretty interesting.
Or where you need to do significant compute on a data set.
So
right?
let me just in the interest of time, and I think, Andreas, I'm going to tee you guys, both you and Richard I'll keep you to time on this because we have a couple of announcements to make, and I don't want to cut anybody off.
Sure.
But at the end here, I think, Jack, you've got something to announce about something. So we'll let you in. I've got my eye on the watch for you. But I do have a question from the web here. One person said, what would be the uses in, say, DeFi for this approach, Richard? And
So
go ahead.
So a really quick one, because it's back into the blockchain world, and I know that's not what we're focused. But one somebody a bit earlier, I forget who it was, mentioned Obscuro. So this is a project, just to give a real life example, a project from a small group of my team, which was started. It started by saying, how can we get some interest around Conclave by showing what it can be used for, and the project it evolved. And the idea was, what if you could build an L2 for Ethereum? So this is actually an Ethereum thing, an L2 that allowed you to protect yourself from being front run, so protect yourself from MEV. So the idea was, what if you could run Ethereum contracts in the EVM inside an enclave, where the fact that you wanted to execute a certain transaction was not visible to anyone. It was just sent to the enclave ran it, and effectively as an L2, so lots of different transactions to process, and then eventually the net results are calculated, and then the whole thing is published. I won't get the details quite right, but the key point was, back to Andreas's point about what happens when it goes wrong. It's designed in such a way that if it were hacked, or if something went catastrophically wrong with the underlying hardware, what you lose is privacy. So you revert back to the original problem, and MEV comes back, but you don't lose integrity, because you were always going to publish the transactions at the end. In any case, you were just deferring it until they'd all been processed and aggregated, and then sent in one job lot. So I haven't done a particularly good job of that, but the idea was, what if you could run an EVM inside sort of like a conclave, inside one of these enclaves, when nobody can see what it's doing, but it's going to operate correctly. That was one of the ideas.
Very good. Andreas, 1 minute on your thoughts about that.
Trusted transaction ordering. Actually, did a talk on that using T's at DEF CON 3, 4, forgot exactly one, and the one in Prague. The EVM is really not the problem. It's that doesn't have to be private. The ordering of the transactions coming in, that's the problem, right? That's where you want to avoid front running, because you want to have a because you want to say, well, my transaction came in later, but I'm paying you a higher fee, right? And I'm seeing it. So it's like, so the point is, are you agree on a time frame and everything, and then a rule set, and all the transactions coming in during that time frame complying to the rule set are ordered. And again, that's done in the TE. So it's you can't, you know what the code is, but you're really, it's just a trusted ordering that you know can't be manipulated, and then basically you spit out the block, and then you commit to the order of the transaction, and the EVM needs to execute it.
Yeah, that's a really good point. So yeah, the Obscura team are going to kill me for completely butchering the description, but yeah,
they're welcome to come on.
It's the ordering of the transactions. The EVM can be whatever, right? It's like, it can be totally.
Actually, I think Nick Criticos's new company, N Labs, might be quite interested in approaches like that. Just something that you guys might want to talk about offline. We're at time. Sorry, Nick.
I'm taking notes. That's okay. I'll follow up.
Great on. Yeah, I really like, Richard, we've been on different teams for years about, Corda versus Fabric or Corda versus Ethereum. And, but I think this is an opportunity where there's really no controversy. We're both looking at the same problem, and the two approaches probably work kind of nicely together. I'll give, there's an example of, just very quickly, where, we wanted to create a voting system where we could take the terror out of, say it's a small group, and I want everybody in this room to rate me, right? Well, the person that gives me a 2, I'm going to know who it is. Right?
We've just built that. We've just built that.
Yeah, right. So what I want, I don't want you to rate me. I want a machine that will accumulate all the votes, and then not provide that output, right? Not even the average, but we're going to do it again next week. And the only thing I get back out of the black box is the difference between the two averages, right? So I've got two series of computes,
like an NPS
output of one going into the input of the other, but I don't want any human to ever see any of it except for the one output, which is the diff.
We think too similarly. We just built a demo just to sort of like try and get this idea across to a non-blockchain audience, and it wasn't quite, but it's basically that. It was, every company's got the same thing. I get maybe consensus on the consensus side is different, but how are employees engaged? When are they going to come back to the office? You want to know what they really think, but you're not going to say what you really think if you think your answer can be de-anonymized. So what if you could be absolutely sure your answer could not be de-anonymized by your boss? It was that kind of idea. So we built a little Android app to show how to do it. Yeah.
Fantastic. You should check out our Battleship game. Maybe we could, Battleship where we combine the two technologies would be fun. With this, I'll there's so much more to talk about. Richard, I could talk to you all day and miss the days where we could do that. Sonal, why don't I turn it over to you and you can wrap us up.
Thanks.
All right. We had one last question from Twitter that was asked, Richard. It is decentralized credit markets, and especially the under-collateralized loan space, have a critical need for trusted third-party on-chain credit scores. Is this a use case where multi-party compute under zero knowledge would excel at?
Whoa, I don't know. So I know we're going to time out, and I should have thought of an answer to that because I saw it on Twitter. So maybe just one. So it's not an answer, but one thing to think about, which I think is a problem for all these techniques, which is you can't prove that time hasn't been rewound. So how do you know that statement that someone's got good credit? How do you know it's current? And how do you know it wasn't based on data from 3 days ago? And actually they just defaulted today, mentioning no major countries. So something that can prove it's current is I think is a problem you have to solve regardless of the technology you use.
Interesting. Cool.
Awesome.
Hey, so you've got some announcements, and I think we've got one last thing to do.
Yeah, so just some quick announcements from my end. We just wrapped up the 2022 baseline roadmap, and I just submitted a PR to get it posted to our repo. So that will be distributed across our channel shortly. And now our core devs and our outreach members and community will be heads down developing and getting some exciting work out this year. So super excited for
Maybe
that
we
to
should
come
do a
out.
grant on figuring out how to do a thing between Richard's stuff and our stuff.
Yeah,
That would be I would vote
Let's
for that.
do
grant.
that, Richard. That'd be fantastic.
Yeah.
yeah,
Let's
cool.
follow up.
We've got Richard. We got kind of a nice little war chest for grants for people to get paid real cash money and for projects.
Oh, cool. Sonal, can you ping me afterwards and we'll have a little chat if you wouldn't
Yeah.
mind. Thank you.
Can do. And that is my main update today, as well as on the baseline website, baseline-protocol.org. Our Get Baselined section now has our first set of 3 sponsors there with contact information to learn more about getting baselined if you're a company that would like to get baselined or provide baseline services and frameworks to clients. So please take a look at that. And that's a very exciting addition to our 2022 baseline roadmap. Now companies can get baselined. So please reach out to me.
Shameless plug there, but you too can be on that page if we start inducting your approach into the baseline and philosophy, and you were to sponsor. That was not our intent in inviting you. By the way.
Yes. All right. And with that, I'm going to hand over to Jack Leahy for some updates from the Provide angle.
Thank you so very much. And yeah, Richard, we actually spent quite a bit of time in the spring and early summer last year working with the R3 team to actually bring baseline enablement to R3. There's definitely a conversation to be had there. There was a number of discussions with your core team relative to that. And we've just actually had some very interesting recent conversations relative to baselining, private permission implementations of this. And so Provide is definitely looking very closely at how to enable those type of ecosystems. And with that said, just tomorrow we have our Provide Oasis open project. It's the Provide Oasis stakeholder briefing. It's from 11 to 12 Eastern. And what Provide Oasis is an openly governed open source project that advances our leading production grade implementation of the baseline protocol. And so this is just an invitation to those in the community to reach out to Carol Geyer from Oasis if you'd like an invitation to it. As many know here, Provide's been a longstanding EEA member, has been a key contributor in the baseline protocol and the technical steering committee. And so this is really the intent of the Provide Oasis project, is to be a conduit to Oasis, the EEA, and the baseline protocol, and really the collective efforts of this enterprise adoption of the baseline protocol. And so, yeah, tomorrow what that call encompasses is really an overview, the goals and the timeline, and kind of why your organization or ecosystem might want to consider joining Provide Oasis. Some of those reasons might be like establishing new Web3 business models and to participate in the DeFi ecosystem, to showcase and contribute to the open source community, participate as a thought leader in the development of open source DAO constructs for the enterprise, earn equitable governance representation. We're going to talk a lot about the governance relative to Provide Oasis, and to bring building public goods for enterprise to a realization. So just wanted to highlight that we are having that stakeholder briefing call tomorrow, again, 11 to 12 Eastern. And invitation is open to the community members, and we'd love to have you there. We have a number of good organizations signed up that will be there already. So,
yeah, I really like how we're starting to see, Richard, so much activity, coming in and around the baseline community. Provide is one of the companies that has been involved for a long time. There's others. There's over 1,000 people and organizations now involved. And I think we've expanded our core dev community by 7x in the last 3 months.
Right.
Largely Sonal Patel and her team have really expanded that, and people are getting a lot out of it, especially now that we have real like projects that are going on. And yeah, it's nice to see now I think this is the first time we've seen a brand new open source code project come out of the baseline work, right? Well, I guess it's not the first time, and there's other open source projects out there. But this is the first one that's been registered in Oasis. So it's a separate project. It's not the baseline project, but it is it inherits from, I guess, the baseline team.
Yes.
Is that right,
and
Jack?
very much leverages the baseline protocol standard, if you will.
Yeah, cool. Thanks, Jack. Thanks for that update.
Yeah.
That's-
Any last words? We have about 3 minutes left here. Sonal, Mark,
I was just
team.
I was just going to ask Samrat if he has an update on his baseline show India that is happening tomorrow.
Yeah, that's happening tomorrow. More baseline music coming up. And thanks, Richard. I think it was a very interesting talk today. I was partly muted for some time. So we have somebody coming over from NatWest tomorrow on the baseline show in India. And yeah, I will be making the announcement on LinkedIn very, very soon. She just confirmed today, so I was not able to post it, but I will. So yeah, stay tuned and hope to see you also. I'm going to set up a new invite because the time has now changed. It's Thursdays at 6 p.m. India time.
Oh, I got that right. I did my time zone math in my head the other day trying to promote that, and I knew it was 8:30 a.m. our time, U.S. Eastern, so 6 p.m. in IST, right?
Yeah.
I heard that we're not going that the U.S. just voted in Congress. I don't know if it's both houses yet to end daylight savings time or make it permanent rather. So maybe we don't have to change the clocks anymore.
That would be so convenient.
So we passed it in California last election cycle, still hasn't gone in, and it's passed the House. It's got to go to the Senate. So there's plenty of time for the U.S. government to screw it up.
They should really baseline that.
Didn't the Senate just like approve it? I thought it was.
I thought it was only one house, half of it. Maybe it's got to go to Congress, one way or the other.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah.
Hey, we forget as here in the States that the Constitution was designed to not get anything done. That's its job. People are like,
well, look,
you're not getting anything done in Congress. I'm like, they're not supposed to.
Hang on, they
vote to get rid of it, and then which one do we keep? Standard time or daylight time?
Daylight, keep daylight.
Yeah,
no. We need to make this a secure multi-party compute exercise where we can all vote.
Oh, I've just got this nightmare. You find this like it finally goes through. It gets the president signs it, and then there's a drafting error, and it turns out that you've just agreed to a single common time zone for the entire country.
If you do secure multi-party compute and involve baselining, you can constantly change the time, and everybody will stay in sync. That's. And with that, everybody.
All kidding aside, thanks, Richard. Thanks, John.
Thanks,
Andreas.
Awesome.
Sonal.
Great to
the whole
see you
team.
all. Cheers.
Have a great week.
Cheers.
Thank you.